Hey y'all, welcome back to Center Sane Podcast, and this is your host Sleepy. This is episode 2 of my podcast, and in this episode I'll talk about foster care, when my mother's mom got me out of foster care, the events leading up to that time, and also what happened when she got me and I was living with her, and how gangbanging started for me. So I would run away a lot from foster care, from the group homes or the foster homes that they would put me in, and I couldn't stay there longer than, I don't know, maybe a few weeks or so, and I would run away. Because the things that would happen there, or the things that I've seen, or when the girls would tell me the things that would happen to them, I was like, oh no, I am not staying here. I'd rather live in the street than stay here and have things like that happen to me. So eventually a social worker came to see me and said, your mom's mom is trying to get custody of you. She's doing classes, she's doing all the things she needs to do, but we need you to do something. We need you to stay in a home long enough for her to come and get you, because you keep running away and it's looking bad for the courts and what have you. Something to that nature. I don't remember word per word. So I said, okay, let me try to do this and stick it out. I stuck it out. She eventually got me. Mind you, the uncle that molested me from the age of 3 years old to 12 years old was living in that house. I didn't know that. So when I got there, I seen him. The other uncle that molested me had died at this point. So when I got there, I immediately did not feel comfortable. Of course, I wanted to be with my mother's side of the family so I can hear stories about her, because no one ever talked about her. I was completely wrong in thinking that, because of course, they didn't want to talk about her either, because it hurt them too much. So I would ask question after question after question, and my grandma would kind of either get sad or she would get mad at me. So I said, okay. No one wanted to talk to me about my mother at all. So I said, well, what can I do? One day, the uncle that had been molesting me and my cousin took me to school, and he looked at me the way that he used to look at me when he used to molest me. I couldn't take it. I started running away. I didn't want him to do to me what he had done to me years prior, especially not at the age of 13. Okay? At this point in life, I felt that I could kind of fight back, or at least do something about it. So I started running away. Everyone would ask me, why are you running away? Why do you keep running away? And I didn't want to tell anyone. I didn't tell anyone why I continuously ran away. My grandmother and my aunt would come looking for me all over the city of Wilmington, because that's where we lived, by Woolhall Park. And I was very embarrassed and ashamed to tell them why. Even people on the street would ask me, why are you out here? Why are you out here? Let me tell you something. The shame and the guilt ate me alive. And I would rather be sleeping in the dugouts at the park sleeping on the benches, and eating out of trash cans than to ever let that man put his finger on me again. Never. Never again will I let someone touch me that I didn't want them to. This is what I was thinking. Everyone would put me down. Everyone would say that I was a little hoe, that I just wanted to be outside, to be with guys and whoever outside. So I said, okay, that's fine. You guys can think whatever you want to think. You guys can say whatever you want to say about me. That's fine. When I went to Wilmington Junior High, I met a lot of guys and girls from Eastside Weedmoss because that's where my cousin lived, on the east side, on L Street. So I knew a lot of them, so I would kind of go over there and hang out with them, but I lived on the west side. My mother and dad were both from the west side, and that's where I wanted to be from. So eventually, I started hanging out and meeting the guys and girls from Westside Weedmoss. Mind you, I lived 1 block away from Woolhall Park, where everyone kicked it. So I started hanging out at the Woolhall, hanging out in the projects. I eventually met a guy and started dating him. Then it didn't work out. He kind of left me for our neighbor, which was cool. So I would be around in the city and his brother would be there. And I was like, oh, okay, I know him, so I would stop by, talk to him. And one day he saw me walking around. He's like, where are you going? And I'm like, nowhere. He's like, where do you live? And I said, nowhere. And he goes, what do you mean nowhere? And I told him, nowhere. He goes, I thought you were living in the alley on Lagoon. I said, no, they kicked me out. He goes, why? I said, oh, because I have a big mouth. Because I would talk back. When people would be mean to me, adults, kids, it didn't matter. I would pop off and say things back all the time. So I kind of explained that to him. My uncle's girlfriend kicked me out of her house because she said I had a big mouth, a smart mouth. So I was just kind of living on the streets for a few days at that point. And he just looked at me and he was like, are you hungry? Do you want to take a shower? And I just was like, yeah, that would be great. So I went inside his house. He had his mom fix me some food. Mind you, I'm probably about 14 years old at this time. He allowed me to take a shower. And I was like, okay, cool. I figured he was just being nice. He had dated my cousin prior to this, so I kind of knew him. So I was like, okay, well, he's just being friendly, And he's 19. As I said, I'm 14. And he was like, we're going to go out tonight. He was like, do you want to go hang out with us in Loco's Alley? And I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? So we go hang out. Mind you, everyone there is older than me. 19, 20, 21, 22. I'm the only kid, basically, that's there. And we're drinking, we're hanging out. They're smoking PCP. I had no idea what that was. And we had fun. He invites me back to the house and says, well, if you don't have anywhere to go, you can spend the night. And I'm like, seriously? And he's like, yeah, you can spend the night. And I'm thinking, oh, thank God. Because eating out of trash cans and sleeping in the dugouts at the baseball field was not the business. So I said, okay. So I go back to his house and he was like, you can sleep with me, And my heart dropped. And I'm like, okay, you know. So I eventually just never left. And we ended up being together in a relationship. After a while, he got very controlling and very violent. I remember one of the times there was bunk beds in our room. I was on the top bunk. His brother and his girlfriend were on the bottom bunk. And I don't even know what I did, to be honest with you. All I know is that he got so mad and literally kicked me off of the top bunk onto the floor. And what could I do? I had nowhere to go. I had no family that was going to take me in. My mother's sister would never let me stay with her. I was the bad influence on her kids, as she would state to my grandmother. So I didn't do anything but cry. What could I do? He eventually told me to shut the F up and come back to the bed. So I did. I went back up to the bed and went to sleep. Well, a few weeks later, we're hanging out with a couple of homeboys from the west side, and they're in the room smoking something, and I'm in the living room watching TV, hanging out. I was not trying to be in their business at all, and I looked just to see what they were doing, and he made eye contact with me. He was like, "Come here." So I said, "Okay." I went into the room, and he was like, "Here, smoke this." And I was like, "What is that?" And he was like, "Just smoke it." And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. Well, the older homie that was there was like, "How old are you?" And I said, 14. He said, "Nah, I'm not going to be part of this. I don't want to be a part of this." He goes, "She's a kid." And he was like, "So?" And he handed me a broken antenna with a little piece of a white substance on the top of it and a lighter. And I said, "What is this?" And he was like, "Don't worry about it. Just smoke it." And I looked at him and I said, "But I don't want to." He grit his teeth, looked at me, and he said, "Smoke it." At this point in time, I was scared of him. He had already slapped me, kicked me off the bed, did all these things to me. And I'm like, okay. Turns out he gave me crack and made me smoke it straight from the pipe at 14 years old. So we're all sitting there smoking crack, all of us. And my heart starts pounding. I feel weird. I don't know what's going on. This is my first time ever doing anything like this. The worst thing that I had done at that point in my life was smoke some weed and drink. That's all I had ever done prior to this point. Me being so scared and fearful of him, I basically did whatever he wanted me to do for fear of getting beat up. It started off as once in a while to almost every single night. To me at that point, now that I look back, I was a crackhead at 14 years old. We used to rob, steal, do whatever we could to get high. Then the beatings progressed worse and worse. They got so bad that his brother and him would physically fight because he was beating me up. And his brother stepped in to defend me. And the first thing that would always come out of his mouth was, "What are you doing? She's a little girl." But he did not care. It got so bad that he hit his brother with an axe and busted his whole arm open. The mom, the dad, the sisters, everyone came outside. I'm not sure if they remember this or not, but I know I do. The relationship between he and I got so bad that I eventually became pregnant from him at 15. And while I was pregnant, he would bring girls in to the room that we both shared. I would be asleep on the bed and he would be on the floor with those girls. And I would wake up and see them on the floor having sex or doing whatever they were doing. And I was so fed up at this point in time that I would just look and turn around and let them do whatever they had to do. I remember being 3 months pregnant with my son, and he pushed me onto the floor on my back and had a whole weight to my neck and said, "I'll effing kill you. I'll effing kill you." His sister was banging on the door, eventually broke the door down and got me out of there. A few weeks later, he and our homeboy robbed the Circle K that was on the corner of my house. So he went to jail, and that was how I was able to leave him. As soon as he went to jail, I was like, I'm out of here. If he comes home, I do not want to be with him. I don't want to have anything to do with him. So I ended up being homeless, sleeping around in the parks and things like that. When I went into labor, no one was there. I had my son a month before my 15th birthday completely by myself at Harbor General Hospital in Torrance. The nurses felt so bad for me that they would come to check on me all night long and ask me if I needed anything, if I had any family. I told them no. I don't remember the nurse's name, but I remember the look on her face, a look of sadness when I told her no one was coming. I remember her saying, "It's okay, baby. It's okay. We're going to take care of you." So when I got released from the hospital, I had nowhere to go. For 2 weeks, my son and I slept in Woolhall Park. I had him in his little carrier, and my homeboys and the guys from Waterfront would come by to check on us. Sometimes they would pay for a hotel for me. They would bring me food and things like that. But we had nowhere to go. I remember my homegirls offering to let my son spend the night. And I, being a kid, just trying to let him have a roof over his head for as long as possible, I would not go and pick him up because I didn't want them to say, "Oh, he has to go," or "You got to take him." I would kind of just let them be for a few days, let him be there for a few days. And of course they were looking for me, and I knew it, but I also knew I didn't have a place to take him home to. I'm not saying it was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, but I would literally leave my son there for as long as he possibly could be there. So I went to go get him. And of course, we went back to the park. Eventually, a lady that we knew let me and my son stay there for like a week or two. her and her boyfriend told me that I have to give them my whole welfare check, all my food stamps, and all of my WIC. Whatever I was getting for the baby, they were in control of it now. So as I stated, I've stood there for a few weeks and thought, you know what, this isn't right. This doesn't feel right at all. So I left. I left that place despite us going to the streets. What really made me want to leave is that one time I was sleeping in her daughter's room, and she had these like 2 mattresses on the floor. And of course, I'm sleeping with my son, so I put him on the inside so he doesn't roll off the bed. Well, I guess because the, mattresses were on the floor and they were kind of like older mattresses, when she came home, my son was in between like the wall and the mattress. I had no idea. I was asleep. And she tried to say that I was trying to harm my son, which I would never, ever, ever do. I loved my son very, very much. I felt so bad that I could not give him a house to sleep in of his own. I would never harm my son. And for her to say that really made me angry. So I ended up leaving her house. My grandmother eventually got my son and was able to take him to my aunt's house with her until she got on welfare. And of course, she got her own apartment after that, which was fine with me because what could I really do for him? So in my mind, I'm sacrificing how I feel as a mother. I really wanted him to stay with me. I did not want him to go anywhere else. He was all I had, the only person in the world besides my mother that would ever truly love me. So I did not want to let go of him at all. But I thought that I was doing the best thing for him by letting her take care of him because I couldn't. That was one of the biggest regrets of my life, is letting him go. I turned to alcohol and drugs to ease the pain that I didn't have my son with me. I got deeper and deeper into drugs. So at 16 years old, I was a full-blown drug addict and alcoholic. I would drink 2 big bottles of Cisco every single night to not remember the decisions that I made and to forget about my past. At this time, I was in the streets still, not having anywhere to go, which at that point in my life, I felt like I deserved that. I deserved to have nothing because my son couldn't have his mother. So we started robbing people. Anything that I could get into, I would. I was on a self-destructive path. I did not want to live anymore. Then I met BD number 2. He saw the situation that I was in, and he definitely took me out of that. He brought me into the hotel that they were living in, right there on Avalon in Wilmington, him and his cousins. And like I said before, at this time I was a full-fledged drug addict, alcoholic. So when I got with him, he started to take care of me. He got me off drugs. And we eventually ended up at his mom's house in Carson. At this point, my mental state was not the best. I had been physically abused from 12 years old to 16 and sexually abused from the age of 3 to 12 years old. So I had a lot of trauma and a lot of mental health issues going on now that I go back and think of it. Every single man that said they loved me in my life had hurt me, left me, and physically abused me. So with him, we would argue, not at first. At first, he took care of me financially like no one had ever. I eventually flew some drugs with one of his friends to Hawaii, ended up getting caught in Hawaii, and came back to the United States because the guy took the rap for everything. When I came back, I got pregnant. And right before I went into labor with my daughter, I started seeing the changes in him. He slapped me one time, and of course I was used to that, so I wasn't going to leave. He took care of me financially. It was like he bought me, I guess you can say. I was 16, 17 years old with nowhere to go, no family to take care of me. And he knew this. After my daughter was born, things got so much worse. He would leave. At first, started off hours. I didn't know where he was. I didn't know where he was going. Then it started to be days. Eventually, he would stay gone weeks at a time and come home paranoid, talking about somebody was following him, looking out the windows. He would come into the room where we lived in Gardena with his brother and his girlfriend, close the door, lock it, turn off all the lights, tell me to get down on the bed, on the floor sometimes. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? I had no idea what was going on with him or in his mind. Then I felt in my spirit, in my soul, that he was with someone else. So when he would come home and try to be with me, I would not want to. So one of the times, I was kind of forced into it, despite me not wanting to. We did. I ended up pregnant with my second daughter. At this point, he started beating me real bad. He would lock me in a room with a deadbolt, and I could not come out of that room unless he unlocked it from the outside. And he watched me go to the restroom and come back to the room and lock it again. If I needed anything, he put a baby monitor in that room for me to communicate with him. He would come in and want me to have sex with him, which made me absolutely disgusted. And he would say that I was being with someone else. I never cheated on him, ever in life. Neither one of them, to be honest with you. That's just not in me. Too loyal for that. So, one night, I tried to run away. The laundry room was right next door to our apartment. I told him that I was going to go get the load of laundry that was in there. And I ran to the street. I ran as far and as fast as I could. I called my grandmother on the phone, and told her, please come and get me. He's going to kill me. I know he's going to kill me. Please come and get me. She kept telling me, call the police, call the police. Next thing you know, I hear the sound system from his car. So I throw the phone down. I try to run. He pulls up in front of me, snatches me by my hair, dragged me on the floor, threw me in the car, drives back to our apartment. He's hitting me in the face so hard, I'm screaming and crying. He drags me to the door. He stands me up, tells me to go inside. As soon as I walk inside, I turn around and he socks me in my face and knocks me out. I wake up in the bathroom with him throwing water on my face, telling me I better not effing die. I better not effing die. You stupid B. I'm barely coming to, and I'm looking around the whole bathroom, and there's blood everywhere. My blood. I get a glance at myself in the mirror. I have a Nike print on my face from where he stomped me out. I have 2 black eyes, a busted lip, and my nose is bleeding profusely. There's blood everywhere. So eventually I hear a hard knock on the door. He takes me in the room and puts me underneath the blankets and tells me I better not say anything. So I'm under the blankets crying out to God to please help me. I just wanted to die. I would rather be dead than be there another moment with him. I hear the police at the door. And he's telling them, no, everything's fine. The police tell him the neighbors called us and said that a little girl is crying in here. And he's like, no, everything's fine. It's just me and my baby's mother here, my daughter. So I hear the police about to leave. And then I hear one of them say, well, let me just look around. And he's like, no, everything's fine. You don't need to look around. And the cop's like, no, I'm gonna look around. I hear the bedroom door open. And I'm trying to stay as still as possible. But I'm also crying in pain from everything that I had just been through. So I believe I had taken a deep breath and kind of started crying a little bit. So all I felt was like, because he put me under a few blankets, I felt the blankets coming up off me. And finally, I see a light, and it's the police. He has the light in my face. I look at him. He looks at me with tears in his eyes. And he's like, ma'am, were you okay? And I just shook my head, no. He pulls the blankets off of me. He looks at my face. I still can see his reaction to me right now as I'm telling you this story. He looked so sad for me. He literally started to tear up. And he tells me, everything's going to be okay. You're okay now. He went out there and said, did you do that to her? Did you do that to her? He starts cussing at, the cops start cussing at him. And they pushed him up against the wall. And all I can hear him saying is, oh, you're hurting me. You're hurting me. And the cop tells him, what about that little girl in there that you just hurt? What about her? You don't think that's somebody's daughter? Would you want somebody to do that to your daughter? So they take him, put him in handcuffs. They take him to jail. Me being the person that I am, not wanting to get the people that I love in trouble or tell or anything like that, I tell them I'm not going to press charges. They take pictures of my face, and the cop that found me tells me, if you don't press charges, when he goes to court, I'm going to go on the stand and testify to everything that I see and hear. He's not going to get away with that. And I looked at him and I said, well, you got to do what you got to do. I'm sorry, I can't. I end up calling his mother and letting her know what's going on. She tells me, don't go to court. Don't press charges on him. He's sorry. It's not his fault. At that point, they had me second guessing myself, thinking that all this was my fault, that I deserved this. If I wasn't the way that I was, he would have never done those things to me. And I believed them. I believed them with my whole entire heart and soul. And I internalized that for darn near almost my whole life. He ended up getting, I believe it was 5 years or something to that nature. I'm not sure exactly, but I'm sure there's a police paper trail or something that will corroborate everything that I just said. Because he did do time for that, for what he did to me. I eventually ended up back at my grandmother's house, where my son was living, and now with my 2 daughters. After my second daughter was born, I went into postpartum depression. I couldn't believe what had just happened to me. And I internalized it. I became a drug addict again. And one of the times my daughter got sick, I said, I'm just going to go and get something from the house. I ended up leaving her there for days. They were trying to get a hold of me. When you're on speed, days are like hours. I didn't realize how much time had went by. And I'm not making an excuse for it. I was a horrible mother. Horrible. I never at this point did anything for my children. I love them very, very much. I just didn't know how to love, not even myself. So they actually, to this day, throw that story in my face to my daughter. But the bizarre thing is, everyone always talks about all the bad things that I did to them. They don't like me. To this day, they can't stand me. But I'm not sure if they know of any of the stories that their dad has done to me. And from the looks of things, they probably don't even care, because I'm always the villain in everyone's story. At one point, I had tried to straighten my life out for the kids. I let the girls go with his mother and went to Job Corps in San Diego. I was at Job Corps for a little while. I tried to make it there. Eventually ended up leaving. Got back on drugs because I didn't have my kids with me. And because I didn't have my kids with me, again, I thought about dying. But this time, I was going to achieve it. So one day, we're at the park, and I said, I don't deserve to live. I don't have any of my children with me. I am a crappy mom. I'm a crappy person. No one loves me. So why am I here? I just want to be with the person that truly loves me, which was my mother. So I go to Walgreens, buy some sleeping pills, a 36 pack. I bought an 18 pack of beer. I can't remember which one it was. And went to the Connect, picked up an 8-ball of speed, went to Scott Park, took all 36 sleeping pills, snorted and swallowed the whole 8-ball of speed, and drank half of the 18 pack. All I remember is waking up in the hospital 2 weeks later, where a psychiatrist was sitting next to me, asking me all these questions. Do you know what happened? Why did you do it? They told me I flatlined on the table. And the crazy part is, I remember seeing myself on the table and them pumping my stomach and doing all the medical things that they needed to do to bring me back. I remember being so angry because I had woke up. I never wanted to wake up. I just wanted to be dead. That's all I remember, is I'm not worthy of life. I'm not worthy to be these kids' mother. I'm a piece of crap, just like they said I was. Everyone was right. I ain't nothing, and nobody's ever gonna love me. This will conclude my second episode. Episode 3, next week, we'll talk about life after suicide. Stay blessed.